Welcome to episode 9 of Drop the Act, brought to you by Performing Perfectly. I'm Chris Key, and today's guest is a former Army PT instructor, Premier League striker, and is now the man shaping England's next generation of elite football managers. It's Corporal Punishment himself, Guy Whittingham. Good morning, Guy Whittingham. Lovely to see you, and thanks for joining us on Drop the Act.
Yeah, morning, Chris. No problem. It's something I've since you mentioned it, I've looked forward to doing.
Yeah, well, it's we sort of go way back. Actually, I've forgotten how many years we've known each other, but through your work at the Football Association and my work with Performing Perfectly, and how those two worlds have strangely collided, which we'll probably come to a little bit later, and probably even can't say too much, can we, in case any of your future delegates are listening, but. We'll come on to that later. You've had a great sort of varied career. I just said in my brief introduction beforehand that you started off as a PT instructor, wasn't it, in the army before moving into football?
I got to become a PT instructor eventually, yes. When you go through the selection, or when I went through the selection back in, when was it, 1985? So that's how long ago it was. Um, you did the physical tests, you did some aptitude tests, and you got a series of colored different types of paper with the jobs that, depending on your aptitude test, what you're allowed to apply for within the army. And I fortunately got all the papers, and I wanted to apply. And on there wasn't the PTI. And I said, "Well, I want to be a PTI." Well, you can't. You have to be in the services for a while first, and then apply to become a PTI. So they said, "We think you could be an armorer." And I was like, "Well, what's that?" And they said, "Well, it's something where you'll learn to mend all the small weapons from a small cannon down to a pistol." I said, "Okay, that'll do." Not really knowing really what it was, just thinking that, well, after I've done that for however long, I'll just become a PTO. But eventually, that's how it happened. Eventually, after 4 years, I did become a PTO.
And so, how old were you, Guy, if you don't mind me asking, when you joined the army?
I was just over. I was. It was sort of 4 months before my 18th birthday.
And was football on? We'll get to football in a bit. Was it on your radar at that point, or was it not at all something you enjoyed, but actually you thought there was a career in the army and not a career in football?
Yeah, and sport was very much on my agenda. Weekends when I was sort of 16, 17 was taken up of a morning might be school rugby, an afternoon might be a men's team. Sunday morning would be rugby, and Sunday afternoon would be a boys' team football. So I was always sporty. Plain and simple, the reason why it became football was in the army you have sports afternoons, which is a Wednesday afternoon. So I walked off to rugby, and I was late. I can't remember why I was late, but I was late for turning up. And they said to me, "Oh, we've got enough already. You'll have to go off to football." So I went off to football, and then that was it really. I stayed playing football on the Wednesday afternoon, then got picked up to the unit side, the core side, and so on until I played for the unit that won the Army Cup. And then sort of, so when you're a young soldier in that area, and you've come in as I've only been in the army 9 months, and I've won the Army Cup with them. Suddenly you're seen as a football player,
Yeah.
and it stayed that way really.
And then your sort of non-league career, didn't that sort of cross over with the army? I sort of read that
Yeah,
you were playing for, was it Waterville and at Yeovil Town when you were still in the army as well?
yeah, I did. Yeah, that was later on. That was after the 4 years after I become a PTI. I'd been to Germany since then, so I did 2.5 years in Germany as an armorer, which um, didn't give me a timetable that was full of work, shall we say.
Yeah.
So again, it's lots of sport in it. It was only a small unit, so played rugby, played football, ran, represented the unit, went off and did lots of different skiing exercises. Really took advantage of, I suppose, in a way, why I joined the army was for an outdoor life and sport,
Yeah.
because that's what I loved, and took full advantage of that of the 2.5 years that I was in Germany. Then I got posted back to the School of Electrical and Mechanical Engineering in Borden in Hampshire, because they were bringing players in to win the Army Cup again, which I'd done 4 years previous. So that was the reason for my posting back. And during that time, when I was there for the last 2.5 years, is when I became a PTI.
Right. Okay. And Is it true you sort of had to buy yourself out of the army to
Yes.
go into football? So
Yes, I did. Yeah.
how does it get to a point where you're obviously you have a career, you have a journey in the army, um, and we'll go into more detail about the sort of commitment and mindset that's involved in that shortly. But I sort of want to sort of briefly just race through your CV, as it were, before we go and pick it apart a little bit more. But so, how did it come from you? Obviously, playing football, enjoying football, scoring goals, winning cups, all with the army, to take that plunge to go. Actually, I've got a career in this. If I buy myself out of the army.
The moves to Portsmouth and buying myself out of the army came from the coach in charge of our unit side had a son that was in the School of Excellence at Portsmouth. And he was just down watching him train one evening. And Alan Ball used to come along because he was the manager at the time, God bless him. Chris Eade, his name is, mentioned to him, I've got a couple of strikers up at my army unit. I think you need to come and see. This was just before Christmas. Anyway, Alan Ball got sacked on Boxing Day. So I thought, oh, that's it. I've got no chance. But John Gregory then came up in January. And he actually said to me, John Gregory, after he saw me, he said, I came up, he said, I saw you warm up, and then I went home. He said, because I knew you'd be okay.
Wow.
And he went home, but then he invited me down to a couple of reserve team games towards the end of that season. Um, and then they offered me a contract. And at the time, the army were so Chris Akabusi was in the army at the same time. So anything that they could portray in terms of the opportunities the army gives you, they put out there. So me going out to, going back into professional football was something for them that they could market and help bring in new recruits. Apparently the working out for the £450 was around how much I'd cost them in terms of courses they put on for me. So you can tell by that I hadn't been on many courses or learned much. 450 quid. But that's, and I had to pay that. But Portsmouth gave me that back. So a good investment from their point of view.
Yeah. Well, you became a bit of a cult hero at Portsmouth. Was it 88 league goals in 160
Yeah,
games?
yeah. It was the fourth season, really. Well, it was 47 goals in total, 42 goals in the season. That got the attention, I suppose, really. Jim Smith, said to me that he built the team around my finishing abilities. So Paul Walsh coming alongside, Mark Chamberlain on one side, delivering crosses. It was a team that were made to create chances.
Yeah.
So yeah, obviously when you're that close to goal, just make sure you hit the target and someone will go in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been I am a football fan, a big football fan, and you were certainly on my radar at Pompey, but even more so when you were at Villa, with me being a local lad and a
Of course, yeah.
West Brom fan. So I was certainly aware of Guy Whittingham scoring the goals for Aston Villa. So what was that like? That step up then from Pompey up into the Premier League with Villa?
Yeah, I think a question gets asked, or you ask yourself the question, am I good enough? And that was something that was on my mind when I left the army, because although the army did say to me that if it doesn't work out after 12 months, you can come back in the same rank, the same job. Um, I think you've got to give things a go to find out, because I don't think I've ever gone through life thinking, I wonder if I could have.
Yeah.
I gave it a go and I was successful at Portsmouth. I then thought, okay, Aston Villa. I think they had come runners up the year before. I'm thinking, wow, this is a big club I'm going to now. I didn't realise how big until I left. Sorry,
Yeah.
I know you're a Baggers man.
Well,
Um,
no, I have to admit it. Don't worry.
so I thought, yeah, it's something. I've got to give this a go. It's the Premier League. It's the highest standard of domestic football you can play. I'd rather give it a go and fail than stay safe with Portsmouth, because there is a contract on the table, or another championship club. So give it a go. And I think the first home game that season, or the first game, was a home game at Villa Park, and it was QPR at home. And so the other strikers I was in competition with was Daniel Atkinson, um, obviously, yeah, great, great striker, Dean Saunders, and then and then a young Dwight York. So I was up against stiff competition.
Yeah.
But that's that again, anything in high performance, you've got to keep testing yourself, I believe. So first game of the season they've won, I think it was 4-1 at home against QPR. And I think there was only, I think that was the time there was only two, maybe three on the bench. It wasn't like nine that they've got now. So I'm thinking, how the hell am I going to get into this side? What have I done moving here?
Yeah.
And it was a challenge throughout. I must admit, it was a challenge throughout. It was a challenging group of players in terms of, go on then, what have you got? Show us. And if you're not good enough, we ain't passing to you.
Yeah.
So you learn very quickly how you had to fit in, and it was a it's a different mindset from Championship players to Premier League players. Definitely, and that winning mindset is everything about them, and they're going to do everything they can to succeed. Yes, they're part of a team, but it's also, they want to play at the very best, the very highest they can, and they want to show you why they're there.
As you've just mentioned mindset, let's just talk about that. What about the mindset that was sort of instilled in you in the army, and was that something that you sort of had already growing up, or was there a massive learning curve in the army, and that mindset, which is, if you're put in the situation, is obviously life or death, and then of course stepping into professional football and climbing up the divisions, the mindset that's involved there. How did you develop your own mindset through this journey?
Yeah, I think I need to go back further with developing my own mindset. So I think it comes from your parents, and then certainly, that was added to by, sport, and then at a young age, and then joining the army and being in the army. So parents that please and thank yous, manners, doing the right thing, and learning to know what the right thing is. Even something like, and grandparents, my grand and my grandma, I remember them worked socks off, to put food on the table, all that sort of stuff. But you used to have Sunday lunches. I'm sure you remember, Chris, and your
Yeah.
grandparents would come around. You go for afternoon family walk.
Yeah.
Even the learning that took place on that, when you pass somebody and you'd say good morning or good afternoon, or you'd be polite and you learn to respect your elders, all that sort of stuff, that helped develop my mindset. Then sport at a younger age, wanting to win, wanting to win, wanting to run as hard as I could for obviously for me, but also to make sure that the team won, and encouraging others to do the same sort of thing on your team, whether that was a youngster playing rugby, a youngster playing football, cricket, whatever it was, part of the athletics team, winning your races, so it helps the group. Um, yeah, and then army, obviously, and it's teamwork's massive. You can't do anything without being part of the team in the army, and respecting the roles that people have, and then trusting the people that the roles they've got, they'll do their job to enable you to do your job. And the whole thing of yeah, teamwork. That's something that the army, when I was in, I don't know now. It's obviously quite a few years since I left, but that's the one thing that, and probably my two best friends are ex-army colleagues.
Right.
Yeah, from 30, 40 years ago.
But teamwork, obviously, it's so important in the army and it's so important in football. But at the same time, you've just mentioned the sort of competition you were up against at Aston Villa. So there's sort of that individual mindset as well, isn't there? It's
Yeah.
it's it's for the good of the team, but also actually, I want to be the one scoring the goals. So you're competing at the same time. How do you manage that balance?
From a point of view of fitting in with the group, they all had the mindset of, they were the best player in that position, which I had to get used to. Um, Whether things came too easy at Portsmouth or what, I don't know. But obviously, I'd scored lots of goals. I had the adulation of being, a decent goal scorer. Then you're up against competition that don't see you as that.
Yeah.
They just see you as another target that they've got to get in front of. That's where their mind is, and my mindset wasn't quite the same then. I don't think to be that. Whether I whether I developed that ability just to have blinkers on. I think I've probably been too much in the team world to think about. "Oh, I'm just worried about myself here." I don't think I ever thought that way when I was on the football pitch. Um, but I think that's a mindset that top players really have first and foremost. Uh, you look at Salah, or you look at Ronaldo. They do things that you think might be selfish, but they're doing it because it's for the best of their team they're playing in. Um, so yeah, I think Villa was a learning curve for me, and think, okay, this is now the environment I'm in when everybody's first and foremost looking after themselves as a player. They all want to play. They all think they should play. Moving to Sheffield Wednesday was a little bit different. Um, Moved under Trevor Francis. Went straight into the team. Scored some goals. Um, Not quite. It's still the same mindset from the players, but not quite so many of them, I think. Um, but then when David Pleat came in, he had a word with me in terms of he didn't see me as a striker there. He saw me as a midfield player, and that was when my mindset was, oh no, 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 I'm a striker. That's where I like playing. I've played there all my career. That's where I'm going to play. And then, funnily enough, after about 4 weeks, you think, oh, I'm not playing much football here.
Yeah.
Okay. Gaffer, what did you say about playing midfield? Should we just go through that again? And then I probably play consistent first team football in the Premier League for 2.5 seasons. Um, and and then that's probably, at Premier League level where you're, playing in the top league, and that was really enjoyable, really enjoyable. But still, I think having more of a mindset of not single-minded, more team first before me. I
And
think I've always been like that.
there's something there about adaptability, isn't there? And, obviously a lot of this podcast is business related. I always want to link things back as well, is how you have to shift and flex and change your approach sometime. Was that something, do you think, you were obviously stuck in that mindset of I'm a striker. Someone saw some real potential in you that you hadn't seen yourself, or you just went, do you know what? If I'm going to play football, then I have to listen and adapt and change.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. That's what it was about. I spent a week. There's 4 weeks as a sub, and I think that's where that mindset of Villa changed a little bit. We're thinking, hang on, I've been a sub here, and I know it's difficult, but I'm not. I don't want to be a sub somewhere else. Um, so I have to think about myself in terms of getting enjoyment out of the game, and if that means changing my position and playing in midfield because this current manager wants me to. If he's going to play me, then I'll play there, and I'll do my very best I can in that position.
And you then moved on. Oh, Wolves as well. Villa and Wolves.
A couple of loan periods, yes.
Yeah, Wolves, Watford, Portsmouth, Peterborough, Oxford, Wycombe Wanderers. Before a move into coaching and management, I just want to touch briefly on that transition. How did you, again, looking at mindset, how was it coming towards the end of your playing career and that moment of what's next? Were you prepared for that? Did you always know, actually, when I finish my playing career, I want to transition into management and coaching?
Yeah, coaching was not necessarily management, but certainly staying in football and coaching and being around football. And sport was something I've always wanted to be in. Um, and it obviously those army days and that sports afternoon took me down the football route. Um, so I always wanted to stay in it. And the problem is when you come to the end of your career is how you stay in it.
Yeah.
So the best preparation you can do for it is obviously in the football world. If you want to go into coaching, to get your coaching qualifications done. So when I was 29, I did my A license. So I was ready, with a qualification if needed. So kept playing as long as I can. I was 36 and I just finished at Wycombe. Having been at Portsmouth, signed permanently under Alan Ball at Portsmouth. When Tony Pulis came in, I was released. So Peterborough and Wycombe were my last two clubs in that term. Um, it was just what to do next. I'm not going to play now. That's it. I'm 36. Legs aren't what they used to be. So I've now, to do myself justice, I've got to get into coaching. I had an opportunity to go with Noel Blake, actually, who we saw at the graduation,
Yeah.
down to Exeter. He wanted me to go and play, and then he said, you could take the strikers. And I thought, yeah, that's a good opportunity, but I'm not going to move the family down there. So I was living on my own. I obviously had 3 young children at the time, and my wife had done enough of like looking after the kids when I'm not here anyway. She keeps reminding me of that. Uh, um, so an opportunity came for a local non-league club, Newport Isle of Wight, to go and play and then be a coach. And I thought, well, it's a good. It's now I need to go and practice, get used to develop my coaching philosophy and the way I want to play. So going to a non-league club, who were then, I think it was the Bees at home, so equivalent to the Conference South. So a decent enough level, trained twice a week, played on a Saturday, sometimes played on a Tuesday. It'd be a good place for me to go and start practicing being being a coach and being a manager, So I took that opportunity there, and then also took the opportunity to so Newport Isle of Wight in the community officer was my other part. So going on the island 2 or 3 times a week and going around the schools and doing PE sessions. So in terms of establishing your ways of coaching and learning how to deal with different size groups and obviously young kids, between young kids, coaching young kids, doing the school half term, football holidays at the club, all that sort of stuff was a good grounding because um it's a new vocation now, coaching. I'd been a
Yeah.
player, but I hadn't coached that much. So now it's a new vocation. I had to try and find a way of adapting, my playing career and what I knew as a player to now being a coach and how I coached. So I used that period of time, Newport Isle of Wight, AFC Newbury non-league, as a time to start, trying to work out how I wanted to play and how I wanted to coach and manage.
And that eventually took you back to Portsmouth, development coach, and then later caretaker manager positions. Correct me if I'm wrong. Manager
Yeah.
positions or caretaker manager. So obviously, then going up into to full management positions in a big club, and having the title of cult hero from the goals you used to score there.
Yeah.
How much of a shift was that then to manage from a business point of view, now managing up and down in such a large club, but also from, I suppose, from a mindset, resilience, and a leadership point of view, the new challenges you were facing there?
Yeah, it was quite a journey because I was a Newport, not Newport, AFC Newbury when I started working for the PFA, Professional Football Association, as a coach developer, coach educator, whatever you want to describe it as. Um, so I had two roles. I was sort of putting into practice what I was teaching, if you like. So that was Newbury was good grounding for that. And I did at the time. At that time I did my pro license, 2006, 2007, and Tony Adams was on the course. So Tony had gone to Portsmouth as the assistant manager to Harry Redknapp. He took over, and he asked me if I wanted to go and do the development team, the 21s as it was then, because he was moving that coach up to his first team staff. So a couple of meetings with him, and he agreed a contract to then go in and be that 21s coach. So, that journey from, doing the kids' half terms and going into infant schools on the Isle of Wight. Now I was, 3 years later, now I was 21s coach at a Premier League club. So, I practiced, I'd got into some ideas about what I could do, but then suddenly you're in with players who are trying to get into a Premier League first team. Um, Lots of agents around, players being brought in for £500,000 that are suddenly into your squad. How do you deal with those rather than the ones that have come up through the academy? Matt Ritchie, Marlon Pack were there at the time as players. Joe Ward, all gone on to have really good careers. And probably the ones that were brought in, I can't even remember their names. So that shows you that they didn't, it's not always the ones that are bought that make careers in the game. But starting then to understand um, the criteria as a coach in a professional club, and being the 21s manager, you had to have in your mind sessions between 1 and 24, because at a split second, players could be taken off with you to go and service the first team, whatever they were doing, which again helps you then when you get into that position, as I did as manager, helps you understand your decision making and how you've got to try to work out what players you want, because if it doesn't, it goes down the chain. So I had players take him off me at 21s. I would then go to the 18s and get players. They go to the 16s and get players. So it has that, to a certain degree, has that level of interruption to other coaches, and what they want to do with their players. But no, overall, that time at Portsmouth, the 21s was really good. But then administration hits. Um, and I think because of the relationship I had with the club, uh, and some of the people there, it hit really hard. For me, it hit really hard because there was good people that devoted their careers, their lives to Portsmouth Football Club, and because some owners had come in and spent money they shouldn't be spending and done things they shouldn't have done, it was through no fault of their own. They did good jobs, but they were out of work, and that was difficult to take. And me as a coach, you obviously worry about your own family, your own lifestyle. Um, so that was a difficult time. Ultimately, I suppose ending up as caretaker manager and then manager through the second in administration in that 6 years I was there. So not just one, but two. Uh, and that second one, so between the first one and the second one, I'd then, so Steve Cottrell came in, they had to get rid of the 21, so that was sidelined. I knew Steve Cottrell from my army days when he was managing a Sunday morning team in the Cheltenham area. He was playing professional at the time, but then managed and coached then. So used to go and play for him when I was in the army on my weekends off. So I knew Cots quite well. He came in, moved me up to assistant. So you learn that experience of how another manager works. But then he'd gone. Then another two managers came in, and suddenly they'd gone, and we were in administration for the second time, and being told that you've got to get rid of your three highest performers, highest paid players. And funnily enough, John Harley, who's a coach there now at Portsmouth presently, was one of them. And he actually thanks me for getting rid of him. Well, I didn't get rid of him. Obviously, the administrators. That's what I told him. It wasn't me; it was administrators.
Yeah.
But he said it really kick-started his coaching career back at Chelsea. But yeah, it was tough times. It was tough not just for the staff, whether that was football staff or office staff or whoever. Obviously, when you go into administration, the club owed plenty of local businesses money, couldn't pay them. Those are the ones you felt sorry for, devoted Pompey fans. Um, and staff, like I said earlier, staff that lost their jobs, you had to really empathize with them because we thought it was tough, but actually they're going home now without a living and without a life because Portsmouth Football Club is their life. Um, but then you get told you're going to be put in charge. You've got to make these decisions. You've got to get the team going. And the team that had, I think 20 points taken off us, something like that as well, 15, 20 points off us because of going into administration. Then you work with the guys that are going to take over the club, they're put in positions, and all the time you're doing your best for them with what you got and kicked out your training ground. So that's interesting, from a point of managing staff and players when you're kicked out of the training ground. I can remember in fact, one of the guys that stayed there as a player said, we got trialists in, got two or three trialists in every day. What's going on? So we've got to try and find players to next to nothing,
Yeah.
and that's the position we were in. But I had Alan McLaughlin and Alan Knight alongside me, and it was probably the right thing to do. Have Portsmouth legends alongside you at the time because that's what the club needed. And to be fair to the high net worth guys that took over, they put their money where their mouth was. They were willing to put six-figure sums to save the club, and they did it. Which was a big relief to everybody.
So I'm going to fast forward to where you are now. All of that you've just mentioned is obviously fantastic experience. Not just the army, but obviously playing as a footballer, the education work you've been doing, and then of course the coaching and management you've been doing to put you in a great position for the job you're in now with the Football Association. And I know your work at the Football Association. I think it started, was it 2014 that you started working there and within the education and coaching teams, but you're now leading the pro license course. So essentially you're charged with creating the new elite football managers of not just England, but international, but hopefully coming through that are our future England managers as well. For anyone who doesn't know, could you just give us a brief sort of what the pro license is and what it means?
Yeah, so the pro license course is the highest course coaching qualification, should we say, you can get in football, and it's a UEFA qualification, and so all UEFA federations will run the course. It's not the FA's course, it's the UEFA's course, and we're running it on behalf of UEFA. So it's an 18 months course, and generally there's 7 modules, but it's about leadership. Essentially, it's about leadership. We look into obviously decision making. We look at interpersonal skills. We look into high performing teams. We look at strategy and tactics. Yeah, it's a mixture of all the things you'd expect to see if you were a experienced leader leading a football club, essentially. Um, and it's for me, it's about creating the environment, creating a learning environment that's going to help our the coaches that come on the course, not just learn from us, not just learn from the speakers we get in and the environments we go into, but also from each other. And it's one of the reasons why we have a strict and quite a rigorous selection center or selection process, should I say, which is 3 stages long, culminating in a 1 day assessment center where we also bring in some assessors, professional assessors, mainly from the military world, to put the candidates under a bit of pressure, to see how they react to being put under pressure, what their leadership qualities are in those circumstances, because it's very hard to do that unless you go into their environment and find areas where there's pressures on. But I think we do it in a decent way. But in terms of the candidates on the course, we do. Yes, it is an qualification. We want our English coaches at the top of the game. Of course, we do, and we know it's not. The pro license will help them within that, but it's not the criteria that gets you to the top. Obviously, the work they do when they're back with their clubs or out in the football world will do that. But in terms of on the course, we want a group of learners that will add to each other. So although it's mainly, it's probably 90%, 95% are English coaches, we do want others to come and share their experiences as well.
So just before we get to how you create those leaders, I'd just like to look at your leadership qualities. So from soldier to striker to coach, how has each of those chapters developed your own leadership philosophy?
Yeah, I think certainly Army, making sure that you're a team player. Any leaders I had within the Army, and when I led a small group, it was always leading from the front. I'm not going to ask you to do anything that I haven't done before or I'm not prepared to do. Certainly that is part of it. Um, Attention to detail, there's lack of it in the Army, somebody gets killed. That's the basics of it. I was fortunate enough to go into the SAS at Hereford last month, and they talk about that attention to detail. But once details are sorted out and a plan's made, everybody sticks to it. You follow the plan. Um, you've got to be adaptable within that plan, and you obviously train and understand ways of being adaptable. But but certainly that understanding of everybody's in this together, and we're going to pull this through together was certainly very much the Army way for me that I learned. Then going into, if you think about strike, I had to rely on others doing their job. I had to trust the others were going to do their job for me to score the goals. And that's the same now, really, in the job I do now. So with the tutors that deliver the course as well, it's not, I might be seen as the course lead, but it's very much about what all the tutors contribute as well as the learners on the course.
Yeah.
And hopefully that's what's seen on the course when you're up at St George's Park. Um, Quite often, funnily enough, when we get speakers in, I know before we go on to it, Chris, you and Lucy, I know we all fully engage in your workshop, but there's other speakers that come in, and I'm off making sure that something else is ready and prepared. That attention to detail as the next speaker turned up. Do they know? Can I just go through finally the last bit about what we're going to talk about? And I'm not in the room, but I can trust that if anything happens in the room, the tutors can deal with it.
Yeah.
So it's being able to give that trust, knowing that you work with some good people.
So there's many things there that you've taken from your own career, and I suppose what qualities do you think a leader in football needs? I'm assuming many of the things you've just said, but what are you now trying to instill in your candidates to become good leaders in the football world?
Yeah, I think you've got to give that aura of authority. And that doesn't have to be, oh, here's the leader. What we're going to do now? Let's all sit up and that sort of thing. It's not that. It's whether it's how you do it. You can be as personable as you like, but as long as you are known as the leader and people respect that, I think that can be developed, like I said, anyhow. And I think it's the same old adage, isn't it? When you go into a football club as a new coach or a new manager, the players are always that, okay, how are you going to make me better?
Yeah.
And I think that's part of the role when you're delivering a qualification that we're delivering. It's not only how you're going to make me better, as in me, the learner, but it's me, the tutor as well. It's hoping that you give them challenges or workshops to organise that does challenge them and helps their growth as well as other times when you can relax a little bit and just enjoy each other's company. I think that's got to be part of it as well. It can't just be all work, work, work. You've got to enjoy each other's company outside of work. You'll have the commonalities because we're all ex-footballers anyway. We've all had a career. We've been in the game somewhere along the line, whether it's me as managing, others as coaches, number twos, academy managers, whatever it might be. We've all had roles in the game that people coming on the course are in. So we've all been in their positions. So I think that helps understanding their world very much so, as much as it helps us develop the program in some way, I think.
It's an immense pressure. I mean, the world of football, like the world of business, there's immense pressure. There's so, you look at a football club, you mentioned it with Pompey, how many people are employed by a football club and how the success of a football club doesn't just affect the wage of the players and the manager, but the person who's cleaning in the football. It can have a massive knock-on effect. But also the pressure on a club or a country, and we've experienced that with England managers and the pressure that they're under to succeed, and the sometimes the impatience of the fans and expecting instant results. And we've seen, even with someone like Gareth Southgate, who has one of the most successful CVs for an England manager. The only thing he was missing was the trophy, of course. How do what qualities are you looking to instill in someone to enable them possibly to take one of those top jobs in football or international football?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and one we always ask ourselves: Are we helping um, a coach and supporting them to become that top coach? What are the qualities? Certainly, certainly from our point of view, it's making sure they understand what's needed to make it to the top. So, like you said earlier, that being able to for 1 minute be the person that gets along with everybody, but then be the next minute be the person that, yeah, okay, I'm doing that now. Like, so that authority to be able to be around people and have a bit of fun and downtime or whatever it might be, but then the next moment the people who are working for now this is work time now. So I don't know how to describe that. It's an it. It's a something that and that authority is through um being somebody who first and foremost knows what they want, understands football, understands people. I think you've got to have those qualities. How much do we allow them to do that on our course? I think we help them in a small amount because it's life that tells you that. I don't think it's just been on a course for 18 months that's going to give you understanding of how people work. But that's where a big part, I think, of creating an environment for us is that peer-to-peer learning and understanding, how other people work. And I had it on a recent module. We were out in Bratislava actually watching the 21s, and one of the learners came up to me and said, "I've never really thought about how some of my staff feel when I'm asking them to do things. But the person who, excuse me for not saying names, but the person who I've just been working with in this small group said that to me. So now I'm suddenly understanding that this person doesn't like to do that. Whereas, when I'm back in my club, they do it well. So I just thought they wanted to keep doing it, but actually they'd rather not do it.
Yeah.
So it's knowing those sort of things, knowing not how to read people, but knowing how what it's like picking a side. Play players in the players they like to play in the position they like to play,
It's
but
understanding
challenge them to get
preferences,
better.
isn't it? Understanding preferences as well. People
Yeah,
have such different preferences and want to work or learn or receive information in different ways, and you need to be aware of the preferences of everyone in your team, in your group, in your, when I say team, I
yeah.
don't just mean players, I mean team around you,
I don't
in
think
order to
anybody
get the
gets.
best from them.
Yeah, I think everybody's different, obviously, but certainly from experiences, you only get better when you're out of that comfort zone.
Yeah.
Just making sure that your staff every now and again you're challenging them out of that comfort zone so they feel a little bit uncomfortable.
It's
I
interesting
think
because
that's good for learning.
it sort of bodes the question, doesn't it? Can you teach leadership or is it innate? I mean,
Yeah.
how do you help people find their voice, find their leadership voice? Let's talk about communication.
First of all, I think knowing yourself, I think that's massive. You have to understand how you work, what your preferences are for sure. Um, and then, without directly asking people who you're working with and who you're managing, try and work out their preferences as well. And that could be just in, informal conversations. Some of the best learning in our courses is done through the informal stuff, whether that's having a coffee or, chilling out in the evening, going for walks, whatever it might be. Yeah, that's some of the best learning in terms of learning what each other's like and what they don't dislike and who you get on with and who you don't get on with.
Hmm.
So certainly that's very much part of what we do on the course, and I think it's part of you ask anybody who's heard stories or knows the top managers. Alex Ferguson's also always talked about. You always talk about he had time for everybody, and he'll know the tea lady's name and they know the person who's sweeping the corridor name. I know a couple of clubs that my son works from, and I won't say who it is, but if the team do well, everybody gets a bonus, right down to the cleaner. So
Yeah.
you feel involved in everything. I think that's great leadership. So you really do feel part of this. The old story about the president of America and asking what a sweeper's doing at NASA, and well, I'm helping get a man on the moon. You feel part of what's going on. I think that's got to be right at the top in terms of when you're leading a team, a group, a company, a football club. Ultimately, what you're trying to do is make everybody feel part of what you are.
I mean, our role when we come in is very brief. Obviously, we often come in on the first module as performing perfectly, and I suppose our job is to sort of let them know what's at their disposal, what they have with their voices, with their body language, how they can communicate and become better communicators in order to lead efficiently. Um, is there a sort of a powerful communication lesson that you've learned from managing or mentoring players or being on the course? Is there anything that stood out to you as something that's been intrinsic when trying to create these leaders?
Yeah, I think there's two things. I think obviously being on your podcast, um, one of the I mean, the reason I know you do. One of the reasons we get you in early is also that it's taking people out of that comfort zone.
Mhm.
So they've all there's 24 on the course. They're all different clubs. So they might know each other, might have passed each other on the sideline, or as players, ex-players, played with each other or against each other. But now they're on a course together. So how do you get them, to share things, to have some commonalities? And obviously, you guys coming in the second day of the course and putting them right out of their comfort zone in terms of having to sing and act from a song in Les Miserables is great for us because now they've got a commonality. Now they've put themselves out of the comfort zone by singing between themselves and everybody listening to them and acting and feeling a bit awkward. As well as I mean, obviously, as well as the things you go on about how you communicate and whenever we do a review of it, it's always that with them about how they've learned that it's not just your voice, it's how you say it, it's how you look, it's how you yeah purvey your body language. All of it counts, and in terms of leadership, that's the first thing, isn't it? And within a second, you make up your mind. I think it's point 0.7 of a second. You make up your mind of what somebody in front of you's like.
Yeah.
That's how our brain works. So, to be able to, put people together in that environment, just to open up a little bit and show vulnerabilities, I suppose, is a big part of them taking the course forward.
The world of football has changed so much, I'm sure, from when you first started playing to where it is now. And when people talk about education in football, and people probably wouldn't believe the amount of detail that goes into the pro license course in order to create the next generation of managers. But at the end of the day, it's a results driven game. So how do you
Yeah.
balance that education in training someone to lead and training someone to win, and how do you manage that whole process?
I think it's the what it takes to win. You take Thomas Frank at Brentford. I think he went a period of not winning for 7 games, something like that. But all the stats they use point to the fact that no, you're fine. It'll turn around because the stats are saying it'll turn around. Whereas you'll get clubs that if you lose 3 games, you're out of a job. Or you might be a manager at a club that's doing okay, doing well, but new owners come in and they want their own manager in. So it's that world that we can't influence that world because the multitude of nations now that are owners of the clubs, from from the Middle East to the USA. You've got owners now that are there, and rightly so. They want what they see as their best manager to run the club to stay in the Premier League, win the Premier League, qualify for Europe, whatever. So we've got to make sure we are able to help the learners on the course think about how they're going to get to the top of the game, whether that's the male game or the female game. And we're looking closely at that, maybe in terms of, considering um, considering managing abroad. They'll help you then get in the Premier League or the Championship, and then from then, where can you go?
But the Brentford is this. It's an interesting situation. You'll know better than me, but I don't know whether he's their technical director or whatever his role is, but he's not come from a football world, has he? He's come from a stats data. I heard a radio interview. He's very much it's that world that he's from, and he's now translating that world into the football world. But his background isn't football at all. Is that correct?
Yeah, that both Brentford and Brighton, the owners are from the betting world. So data is a big part of what they do, and they see that in football. I don't think it can't be a coincidence that you look at those two clubs that, with all due respect to them, they're not the biggest clubs in the Premier League, but they seem to do pretty well every year.
Yeah.
And seem to have clubs that are run pretty well because ultimately that they've got owners that are in the betting world and obviously make lots of money through that, so we know what data can provide you.
And we've touched on resilience earlier, and your resilience for you going through your career in such a temperamental industry. How do you help build resilience in elite athletes or in managers in this case? I just wonder if there's a way business leaders can apply similar techniques.
Yeah, I think it's first and foremost, I think going back to what I said earlier about if I hadn't come out of the army and had a go at being a professional footballer, I'd have asked the question, could I have? So when you do get that position, it's then having the resilience not to give up early. How can I make this work? How can I prove to my teammates or prove to the manager that I should be playing week in, week out? Obviously, I've not been out there in business as such, but if you're struggling a bit, what is it? How can you work out? How can I get better at this? And that was a challenge out at Villa. There was a challenge when I first came out of the army. Um, there was seasoned pros playing in my position, but I just every day made sure I was the best I could be. Every day did the things that the manager asked me. Tried to be the best team member for the players around me. Whether that meant doing their running for them or whatever it might have been, giving your all, making sure that after training you're doing the things that will make you better, whether that's in the gym or you didn't feel. I think it was the season before I scored all the goals. Um, I didn't feel so. It would have been the 19. Let's go back a bit now, Chris. The 91-92 season. Before I started that season, I didn't feel I'd got myself physically fit enough. Um, so before the 92-93 season, before pre-season, I did 3 seasons with an athletics coach. a guy called Arvil Lowe. He was in charge of Team Solent. So Roger Black was one of his athletes as a coach. So I got together with him and I did some running before the preseason starts. So like a preseason.
Yeah.
And then obviously, I don't think it's a coincidence that I then went on and scored all those goals that season because I was super fit.
Yeah.
So making sure you can do everything you can to give yourself the best possible chance of succeeding. Um, it'll be different for everybody in whatever industry you are, but make sure you do that. I think is paramount, but not to the extent that you're not enjoying life. You've got to have some social life as well. But when you've got the time to dedicate, what do I need to do to get better here? I think is certainly top of my list.
And the role of a manager has changed so much. We hear about Alex Ferguson, the hairdryer treatment, and we see videos of Brian Clough back in the day, and then we see Phil Parkinson now, very featured in Welcome to Wrexham, and Mikel Arteta and Pep Guardiola in the Amazon series. So we're seeing how different managers approach. There's more fly on the wall documentaries being made, but their style and their delivery has changed. How do you educate the sort of soft skills, the emotional intelligence, or do you? And it's balancing again that sort of high performance, and we think of high performance and energy, but sometimes actually having to be more emotionally intelligent is important as a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And it's not just players that are wanting you to give them everything you've got to make them better, because ultimately that's what players want. It's also you've then got entourages that the players at the top have got with them as well, and you can't ignore them, whether that's agents, whether it's physios, whether it's sports scientists, whatever it might be. You've got to make sure that you know what's going on, and that player trusts you in terms of being able to help them progress, help them become the best player they can, whether that's to win trophies or whether that's to ultimately play in the Premier League or become an international. And that again, I think is, I mean, I didn't have it to the extent when I was at Portsmouth because we were in League Two at the time, but players want to get better and players want to know you care about them before they care about you. That's the old saying. So, how do you establish that relationship with players that they trust you? And there'll be times when they'll be asking questions around that because you won't be picking them. So, but then you still want to challenge them, and you still have got their interests at the top of your mind.
And I suppose we're coming back to preferences then, aren't we? Being aware of each player and what they need to show that you're
Yeah,
able to care for
yeah,
the individual.
which is a harder and harder job these days, I think, for managers at the top level. Um, but you've still got to have that personality, I think, that you can engage with all players at your club.
And have you seen sort of shift in the approach of younger coaches, how they approach education and learning in football? Have you seen a change over the years?
Uh, have I seen a change? I pretty much think that most coaches that we have on the course are pretty open-minded when they come on the course. For the 10 years I've been doing it, and a lot of coaches now, whether they are managers or part of a coaching team, um, are now, and it is a different. We know it's a different generation. You have that in your world,
Hmm.
and they learn differently. They want to be told things in a different way. They want to be asked to do things in a different way. And I think everybody's. You look at communication. We say kids don't communicate as well as we do, but they do. It's just a different way. And I think everybody understands that, and everybody understands that's the way it is now. So whether it's the many different ways in social media you can communicate now, or whether it's and how do you do it to your players, and how do you do it with the board members and the staff and the owner, how regularly to have meetings. One of my biggest learnings, I think, was I didn't probably communicate enough with the board of directors and the chairman when I was managing.
Yeah.
I did it what I thought was right, but it wasn't right for them.
No.
So having been in that position and understanding that, I know how important it is that everybody understands what you're doing.
Yeah.
So I think that from a whatever age group of the players. Because in a squad, you'll obviously have those more experienced players. You might have internationals. You'll have younger players. You'll have so many players speaking different languages. Do you learn a language? How do you communicate with them? Do you show a willingness to understand their language? You've got to be you, but you've got to understand how you be you with the very different types of players and staff and management above you, CEOs, owners that you have now, and board of directors.
I think it's something we discussed when we're there, that idea of authenticity, but just stepping into the role that you need to in each situation that you're in. You're still you, but there's bringing a different version of you to get the outcome that you want.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know we've been talking for a while, so I will let you go. A couple more things. Just I just wonder, you might not be able to name names, but I just wondered if you can go ahead. But somebody either on the course or since you've followed their journey afterwards, someone who's really impressed you, someone whose leadership style or their approach or something they did in their delivery, is the one person who stands out to you and you go, yes, that was an impressive individual and for X, Y, or Z reasons.
We had somebody recently on an alumni event that wasn't working with us when they were in the Premier League, but you could see why they were managing the Premier League. Their authority in the way they spoke, the clarity in the way they spoke. They were presenting on their philosophy, and at the end of it, at the end of an hour, you were very clear on what his philosophy was and how he coached it and what he expected of the players.
So another clear communication.
Clear communication, knew exactly what it was they wanted. So not only did they know, you were left in no uncertain terms what that was. There was no grey areas around how they wanted to play. Again, someone currently on the course, not somebody who's loud on the course, but when they speaks with authority.
Mm-hmm.
And they're good at what they do. No matter what it is. Sometimes it's just the question they ask. Whether that's in front of the whole group, or whether that's just in one of the small groups you might be working with. The questions that they ask, or even something they do that makes you think, they're thinking it, she, they're thinking in advance of where these others are thinking at the moment in time.
Guy, I'm going to finish with a very quick fire round, okay? So you can just give a very short answer, okay? A mantra or a quote that's guided you, or something someone said to you over the years that stuck with you?
Yeah, I think it's that one. Don't ask somebody to do something that you're not prepared to do yourself.
A quality that separates a good leader from a great leader?
Be personable.
And if you could give your younger self one piece of advice about leadership, what would it be?
Take people with you.
Fantastic. Guy, thank you so much for your time. I could talk for ages, as you know, about football and the work you're doing now. It's always a great pleasure to step foot into the Football Association and work with you and your team and the cohorts. And I wish you all the success in the future.
Chris, thank you. And I'd like to put on record the thanks for you and Lucy to come and do what you do. It's extraordinary, and it really does help us galvanise the group together, as well as help them understand what it takes to be a leader.
Our pleasure. Thank you, Guy Whittingham.